3 topics that could be the make or break of you passing or failing the Course 2 Ontario Real Estate exam. If you're new here, I'm Shiva. I've been a realtor in Ontario for almost 2 years now, and I've helped over 500 students get their real estate licenses. In this video, I'm going to cover 3 of the hardest topics that you're going to see in the Course 2 Real Estate exam. Quick note, if you are struggling with the real estate exams, you can check out my private and groups tutoring sessions below. That's how I help tons of people like yourself, and they might be helpful for you as well. Okay, so first things first is multiple representation. Now the definition for this has changed a lot over the years, especially since Ontario has now involved the new law, which is called TRESA. However, for the real estate exam, it's still going to be according to the original definition, and so the definition looks something like this. Multiple representation is where a brokerage represents more than one client with competing interest in the same transaction. Now keep in mind, I said brokerage and not the agent. This is because, remember, the agent represents the brokerage and the brokerage represents the client. Okay, now there are 2 examples of multiple representation that you're going to see most apparent in real life and the most questioned on for your real estate exam. The first is one brokerage represents both the buyer and the seller in the same real estate transaction. The second is one brokerage represents 2 buyers with competing offers in the same transaction as well. And so in both situations, whether it's only one agent or 2 agents from the same brokerage, they are both considered multiple representation. And now you have something called competing interests, because if you represent both the buyer and the seller, how can you guarantee the buyer the lowest price for the property and also the seller the highest price for the property? Or if you're working with 2 buyers with competing offers on the property, how do you guarantee one buyer that they're getting exclusive interest and doing all you can to get them the property when you're competing against yourself? And so remember, because we are not individual agents and we represent our brokerages, as long as you're from the same brokerage, according to the old rules before TRESA, which you will be tested on for the exam, it is still considered multiple representation. And so there's a huge list of things that you can and cannot do when in a multiple representation transaction. And the very first thing is that you have to get written permission from both the buyer and the seller if you are in multiple representation, or from both buyers in that multiple representation situation as well. Now, once you get that permission, then there are a list of things you can and cannot do. There's so many things, and I can definitely make a more in-depth video on this in the future, but the gist is that you do not want to sway one buyer or one seller into either direction. And so this means abstaining from relaying any sort of client information that might bias your buyer or seller into either direction. So this could be stuff like giving advice to your buyer or your seller, letting your buyer know the seller's motivation for selling the property, letting your seller know the buyer's timeline on buying a property. All of these things now are making you biased, and they are prohibited in multiple representation. And so the goal is that in this sort of situation, you have to be simply relaying facts. If a seller asks you, hey, do you think this offer is a good offer? Should I accept it? You simply cannot tell them what they should or should not do, and you can only give them that information perhaps in the neighborhood on what typical houses of this kind would receive as an offer, and maybe what looks like a good offer in other situations. But you cannot explicitly say, yes, this is a great offer, or you know what, I think you should do this. Okay, and number 2 is conditions. And when I say conditions, I don't mean any condition, I mean condition precedent, subsequent, and the true condition precedent. These conditions are essentially all theory, and so you're not actually going to see these words on a real agreement of purchase and sale, but they do help us classify different conditions that we add to Schedule A, such as a home inspection or a well inspection. And with that classification, we get a better understanding of what are our rights and responsibilities as either a buyer or seller. And so to cover them in a nutshell, we'll start with the true condition precedent because this is the easiest. This is simply a condition that must be done before we move forward in the deal. Meaning once the contract is accepted, now we're in that conditional period where we're trying to complete all the conditions we agreed to. And if I have a clause such as a mortgage financing condition, and I write that as a true condition precedent, this means that when we get to this point where I have to get the financing by this date that we agreed on, we cannot progress the deal until I complete that condition. And if it so happens that I'm not able to complete the condition or I do not want to, then the deal is automatically canceled. There is no other option. And so with the true condition precedent, it's really a do or die. If you are able to do the condition and fulfill it, then you use a notice of fulfillment, you send that to the other party, and you let them know, hey, we're all good, we can keep going and progressing with the transaction. If, however, you are not able to fulfill that condition, or you simply do not want to, then it is an automatic termination of the contract, and that can get a little bit scrappy depending on what it is. For example, if it was a mortgage financing and the buyer defaults, meaning they didn't fulfill that true condition precedent, it would require a termination of the contract, but it could also entail the seller suing the buyer in return for a bunch of other things included in that sort of condition. Now, there is also the condition precedent, which is very similar to the true condition precedent. However, the difference with the true condition precedent and the condition precedent is the latter can be waived, meaning we can waive a condition precedent. And so if I write a home inspection as a condition precedent, I can either do it and fulfill it and we can progress the deal, or if I don't do it, it's not simply a do or die. I don't have to cancel the deal and I can actually waive the condition and still progress the deal forward. Meaning I now have three options. Either fulfill that condition, waive the condition so you don't do it, but you still continue the deal, or you cancel and you terminate everything. Now in real life, there's a lot of reasons you might use the condition precedent. Typically, it is only used where you're having a condition that is to the benefit of either the buyer or the seller solely. This would be something like a home inspection, where the full benefit is really only to the buyer. So if the buyer waives this condition and doesn't do it, the seller wouldn't really mind too much. And so the buyer could waive it either because they didn't have time to do it, they weren't able to do it, or they simply did the inspection and they weren't really happy with it. So they're actually going to waive the fulfilling and say that, you know what, it wasn't satisfactory to me, but I'm still going to progress and buy your house. Now, this is very different from the true condition precedent, because in that condition, this is usually written to the benefit of both the buyer and the seller, such as mortgage financing, which not only benefits the buyer because they can buy the house, but also the seller because they can actually sell the house and get the money. And so when those things are not fulfilled, that's why it's an automatic cancel, because the buyer can't say, hey, I didn't get the money, but don't worry, I'll waive it. And I won't give you the money, but I'll still buy your house. That really wouldn't work in real life, and so that's why we use the true condition precedent. Okay, and the final one is a condition subsequent. This is the rarest in real life because it is simply not as useful as the other conditions. Now, this condition is a condition that must be avoided to progress the deal. Meaning these are simply negative scenarios that we don't want to happen, which we write into the contract just as a precaution, that if this random thing happens, we're both agreeing that we're just going to cancel the deal. These could be stuff like bankruptcy, like mortgage default, like accidents or death of certain people. Any of those things you could write as a condition subsequent. And so with the condition subsequent, there's actually no fulfillment, no waiver, and only a termination. Meaning with these ones, no news is good news. If there's no fulfillment and no waiver and you receive nothing from the other party about this condition, that's the best case scenario. That means everything's going well, everything's going as planned. However, if you do receive a notice from the condition subsequent from the other party, it's probably going to be a notice of termination. Okay, and the third and final topic, which you're going to get tons of questions on, is the client versus customer. Now keep in mind, this is something that was in place before TRESA happened. However, you are still going to be tested on your exams as of 2024. And so a client is someone who enters into a representation agreement with the brokerage, while a customer enters into a customer service agreement with the brokerage. And so with a client, we get fiduciary duties and we must protect their best interest. However, with a customer, we don't have that same responsibility, but we do still have to treat them with fairness, honesty, and integrity. And so in a nutshell, a client we're going to do as much as we can for. We're going to do our best possible service and go outside of our way to look out for their best interests. We're going to take a bullet for them. While the customers, on the other hand, they're only asking for limited service. This could be something like, just post my property on MLS and that's it. Or maybe just print some flyers and distribute them for me for a simple couple $100 fee. And that's it. And so with the customers, we're only doing the limited service, nothing outside of that scope. not including material facts. Now, if you don't know what material facts are, these are things that are important to either the client or customer and could possibly change their decision about the property. These could be defects and things that are wrong with the property. However, they could also be positive things that the client or customer was actually interested in. For example, if the client or customer we're working with has kids, it might be material fact to let them know if there is a school nearby the house we're looking at. However, if a customer only asks us to deliver flyers to sell their property, we might not have to tell them if we notice a bunch of unsellable features in their house itself, perhaps outdated furnishings or colors and small aesthetic defects that might not be attractive to certain buyers. That really wouldn't be in our scope because we are only limited to what the customers asked us. All right, that's it for today's video. Drop a like and subscribe and share with anybody you think it would help. And check out all the goodies in the description below. I got tons of free stuff for you guys. You sign up, I send you checklists and notes and all these things for free. So check those out and let me know what I should cover in the future. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.